everybody.
Hi, thank you for being here.
I have to congratulate you guys on your super discriminating taste in bailing on the Oscars to come to this event in the teeth of a blizzard, which is going to be here any second.
Yet to materialize, but I'm sure we'll be here
Yeah,
in a second.
it's coming.
Yeah.
So I'm really sure that we're going to have a lot more fun than we would be having at the Oscars with fewer montages and large musical numbers.
And I had threatened potentially to wear a black tie, which I did not, although I did buy a new dress, very importantly. And I wore inordinately high heels, so I think that kind of makes up for it.
More than makes up.
Yeah. I think so, yeah. Is this your seamless transition?
Yeah, no, I told you it'd be good, right?
Yeah.
We're professional.
Okay.
Let's talk about Panic.
Okay, let's do it.
What is this Panic book that is coming out on Tuesday, right?
It is, yes, although there are Panics for sale here. It's a special 2-day early situation. I'm very articulate tonight, you can tell. Yeah. It's going well already.
I'm dying to talk about this book because I've read it and it's awesome.
Thank you.
And I want, first of all, to talk about the game, Panic, because it's sick. It's a sick idea, and I want to know how you came up with such a sick idea, because it's disturbing.
Yeah, well, unfortunately or fortunately, most of my ideas tend to be a little bit sick. But Panic comes from a kind of unlikely place. Because Delirium, which was a fantasy trilogy or had elements of fantasy, actually came from some kind of real world news stuff that I was watching at the time. But Panic was based on a fairy tale. It's a lesser known fairy tale from Grimm's and kind of comic, unlike much of his other work. And the title, perhaps this is why it's lesser known, because the title of it is something like The Boy Who Went Forth to Learn About the Shivers. So it's not really, it doesn't lend itself to
it's a good one,
constant
though.
repetition.
I know that one, yeah.
And anyway, it's about a boy who kind of, in the parlance of the time, is too simple to feel, he can't experience fear. He doesn't understand it. So he goes forth into the world to learn what fear is, and then of course there ends up being like a haunted mansion, and if he can withstand 3 nights there, then he gets the hand of a beautiful princess. And it made me, which he manages to do with comic results. But it made me start thinking about what would allow people or enable people to withstand certain kind of fear, tests of fear, other than just like a preternatural courage. Like whether there were other motivations or other character traits that might enable people to, withstand intense fear. So, and then that's where Panic came from, the idea, which is about teens in a very rundown, kind of desperate place who, they play a dangerous game of basically fear every summer, and the person who can withstand the game takes a big pot of money that is accumulated over the year.
Are you a fearful person? Have you acquired the shivers?
I don't think I'm a fearful person, although I have very particular and kind of inane fears. I have a desperate phobia of worms, randomly, and itchy sweaters. I really can't stand itchy sweaters.
They're bad.
I don't like to even be in the same room. I hope nobody's wearing an itchy sweater. But no, I don't think I'm particularly fear-driven, but the other thing about Panic is that, of course, while the game is set up and there are actual, challenges that they have to withstand, really it's also about the difference between, the fears that are the challenges, the outward fears of crossing a 6-lane highway blindfolded, these kind of material embodiments of fear, and then on a deeper level, what the characters are really afraid of and trying to escape by playing the game. So in that sense, I'm just as afraid as everybody else about these things that I think all people, maybe especially when you're young, but really are afraid of, afraid that you won't have a future, afraid that you won't be loved, afraid that you'll somehow be trapped in identity that doesn't feel like yours.
Yeah, we talk about some of the principal characters. Do you want to introduce the sort of hero, heroine?
Well, it was actually fun because, as you have written from 2 points of view, although you didn't in the first Magicians, did you? No,
that's right. That was just Quentin, yeah.
Yeah. So was that deliberate that you then transformed it, that you then split POVs in subsequent novels?
Well, I hadn't planned to. I thought that in the interest of preserving some vestige of Aristotelian unity, I would try to stick to one point of view for the whole trilogy. But then, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, I made the mistake of letting another character tell a story. She had one chapter in which to tell it. It wasn't her POV. Like, you know, Quentin would be sitting there listening to her tell the story, and she had so much to say. She went on and on, and she was so angry.
Yeah.
By the time I was done telling her story, it took up half the book. That is, it's one of the few times, authors sometimes say, oh, my characters, I never know what they're going to do next. They're so unpredictable, I just let them talk. And then I punch those authors because it's so obnoxious. It makes it sound so easy. But that is the only time when that has ever actually happened to me. I felt possessed by this person.
Yeah, although I do feel that that does happen to me to some extent. Not that they then just like run away and I'm left frantically following the words that they are putting out in some kind of magical or mystical way. But I do feel like this is why when people ask me, because I've written for middle grade, I've written for teen, and now in the fall I'll have my first adult novel, and people ask me, well, how do you adjust? You know, how can you determine or adjust the language or adjust the content so you make sure it's for the right audience? And I do feel like characters do get a certain kind of their own sentience. And so, like in my middle grade novels, once you have a really well-developed character and you can trust them to lead you forward, like in my middle grade novels, I never worry that like Liesl and Poe is gonna like stop suddenly and want to drink at a bar. You know, I mean, she has her own kind of integrity and she has a world that is built around her, so she does kind of lead you through it. And I tried to kill off I wanted to kill off a character in Requiem so badly. And then by the time it came to Requiem, the person like refused to die. Just,
really?
Like, wouldn't give up the ghost.
I've been trying to do that too.
I know. Oh, really?
For years, kill off one of my characters, and
Is it Quentin?
He won't die. He just won't die.
But yes, in answer to the original question, Panic takes place from two different points of view, Heather's and Dodge's. Dodge is a boy, and Heather's a girl. It was kind of fun because I've written in middle grade my middle grade is kind of third-person omniscient, but I have written about boys, but this was my first really male point of view. So that was kind of fun and a challenge. It wasn't exactly deliberate that they would center around those two characters. Actually, originally in the first permutation of the draft, I had like a section called Voices because I was so interested in what would drive people to participate in such a dangerous game. And I did feel that people would under certain circumstances. So I kind of actually wrote little snippets of a bunch of different characters, almost everybody participating in the game. But over time, my interest began to gravitate pendulum-like between these two characters, so they became the primary points of view.
You still haven't told us much about them.
Oh, sorry, am I supposed to? Okay.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I don't know anything about them. Heather is kind of an every girl, I think, or at least she thinks she's an every girl. I mean, Heather is a girl, she thinks she's not very special. She thinks she doesn't really have anything going for her. And she doesn't believe she has any chance of winning Panic and is kind of motivated to participate and compete after a single kind of traumatic emotional event. Her motivations get a lot deeper because of things that happen subsequently within her family situation, which is far from ideal. She's growing up in pretty abject poverty with a mother who is not a great caretaker, and she has a beloved little sister. So she kind of enters into the game randomly. Dodge, on the other hand, actually has always intended to play the game and has very specific motivations for playing. His older sister played the game several years earlier with kind of disastrous results. And so his was really interesting to write. I like to write unsympathetic characters because, well, it's just a challenge. That was true of Before I Fall, certainly, where people hated the main character at the start.
People hate my main character, too.
Really? Oh, yeah. Because he's so, like, angsty?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. I can see that. But, I mean, he evolves. That's the whole point, though. You write those characters partly so that they evolve, as real people do.
I agree, yeah. I feel like that's part of, I mean, if you're going, the novel's nothing if the characters don't evolve. But if you begin the novel with a significantly unevolved character, it's sort of no fair making them likable, completely likable, because unevolved people are a pain in the ass.
I know, it's true. Well, I have two questions, actually. well, one question, one statement. First of all, did you deliberately choose to make Quentin in the first Magicians kind of so angsty because you were making a commentary on the fact that even in a world where you discover there's magic and that you participate in it, it won't fundamentally change who you are? That's my interpretation, in case you guys couldn't tell.
My real point, well, that was a point. But I mean, honestly, you don't start a novel with the idea of making a point, I think, necessarily. You just think this is a story that needs to be told. And I felt as though I was essentially writing Harry Potter fan fiction. But I thought, well, let's think about it as a sort of thought experiment. What kind of person really would go to a school for magic? Who would be drawn to that? And I feel like it would not necessarily be the most mentally healthy among us. I feel like it would be
more the Dungeons and Dragons crowd.
Very much the Dungeons and Dragons crowd. People who, due to the circumstances of their lives, they're depressed. They are obsessed with fantasies of having power that they don't have. Obsessed with escaping from the grim reality that they inhabit. This had nothing to do with my own personal circumstances at the time of writing the book. I thought that's who it would be, and so that's who I sent to my magic school.
Yeah, so I think that it's interesting too, because I feel like, I don't know if you've had this experience, people then end up, readers can feel, well, I mean, again, unevolved characters are challenging for readers, but I never really understand it, because it's not like I feel like most people in real life are evolved. So it seems like, so it seems as though people would have more tolerance for them on the page, but I think it can be really uncomfortable for people to see less than likable characters on the page. And the thing with Dodge in my novel is that, I mean, he's, I think, likable in many ways and sympathetic in many ways, but his motivations are very deeply immoral. Certainly at the start of the book, what he intends to do is fairly awful. But the challenge as a writer is then to make people still care and actually root for him, and then question themselves even as they're rooting for him about what that means about their kind of moral capacities and stuff. I mean, that's not the point, but that does end up happening, I think.
Where did the name come from, Dodge?
Well, I also don't know if this happens to you, but I tend to write like half a failed novel in between writing my real novels. So, because I have to write every day, but that doesn't mean I have a good idea every day. So when I finish a book, I tend to throw myself optimistically into another book and then realize at about 20,000 words that it's completely horrible. And that was, Dodge came from one of those kind of failed experiments. I literally, you should never basically, here's my writing advice for any aspiring writers. Never try to write a novel based entirely on a pun, because I literally just wanted the name Dodge, and I was like, he'll like, his family will always be traveling, like, get out of Dodge. That's what they'll always say to him when they lead him elsewhere. And then there was no plot, there was nothing, just that. Just that. So that's where the name came from, and it stuck. Yeah.
The world of Panic, it's a gritty world. I mean, it's the Delirium books. They are technically a dystopia, but I would actually rather live there.
Right. Yeah.
Even getting the drug where I can't love anybody, I'd rather live there than live in that damn town that I live in.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Were you sort of consciously going for something sort of grittier and?
I don't know that I was consciously doing it, although I was, as you said, just coming off of writing a dystopia, so maybe unconsciously I kind of was looking at ways in which the real world can become kind of dystopic. Is that a word? Is that a word?
It is
Did
now.
I just make that
it's
up?
now. It is
Awesome.
now a word. Yeah.
Okay. Call the OED and just tell them coined a term. But I do think it's endemic in the concept. I'm not sure that people who were from really comfortable backgrounds would have as much motivation to compete over money. Although, of course, the game becomes about a lot more than money. But it's certainly an initial motivating factor. I think it was more just, and I'm sure this happens to you, even though, of course, the concept for the Magicians didn't have anything to do with your own emotional life. And Quentin, I'm sure, has nothing at all to do with you. But, at the time I was spending some time in Portland, and I was in a nice area of Portland, but it was kind of close to like a big area of strip clubs and like trailer parks, and I was just seeing that every day. And because I'm a writer, I always wonder what it's like to live places or be in situations that I'm not in. So I think that kind of partly motivated. I feel really bad though, because I named the town Carp, and it turns out that's the name of a town in Canada that's really nice and not at all like the meth-infested town that I've fictionally made it out to be. So, I have a similar question directed back at you, which is that, especially with Fillory, which is a magical kingdom in obviously the magicians, I mean, it's kind of beautiful, and I mean, it's beautiful and magical and everything else, but there's like a lot of really dark things, dark aspects, dark characters. I mean, even the gods prove to be slightly, or more than slightly flawed. Was that again deliberate? And also, where did that whole world come from? Because I think world building is so incredible in your novels. You build the world of Breakbills, you build the world of Fillory, you build obviously the real world. You built an airport hotel convincingly in Newark. I hope you didn't actually have to stay at one to do research. But do you have like a separate document? Do you do separate research?
Well, there's two like paradigms for world building. There is the Tolkien paradigm, where before you even get started, you write an entire dictionary of Elvish, and only then are you allowed to start slowly building your world. And then there's the other paradigm, which is that of his close personal friend C.S. Lewis, who had no interest in continuity whatsoever, and he would just cherry pick things from left and right. If you want fawns in your book, great. There's a fawn. Santa Claus too. Great, we'll have Santa Claus also in the book. And it doesn't matter. It's this crazy, pastiche of just whatever he was interested in, when he got up that morning. And it makes no sense. Even like committed Narnia scholars cannot actually make the whole world of Narnia
cohere. Yeah.
It doesn't cohere, right? I'm the owner of several sort of encyclopedias of Narnia, and there's always little entries which is just like, it gets to the end of the entry and it's just like, we're really sorry, this doesn't make sense. And in fact, Lewis incorporated into one of his later books a couple of things from Tolkien's universe, and he misspelled them, and Tolkien went insane. He was so angry, but Lewis just didn't care. I mean, the whole country is basically feudal level technology, except for Mrs. Beaver, who has a sewing machine. Why? You don't have, that's Victorian. You can't have the two things.
But I love Mrs. Beaver.
That's the thing. One loves Mrs. Beaver.
One does love Mrs. Beaver. Yeah.
And yet, because of that, I felt growing up, I felt slightly betrayed by C.S. Lewis because of how poorly my obsessive rereadings of the Narnia books had prepared me for the challenges of middle age. And I thought I would go back and try to sort of reinscribe into that world, some of the realities, because reality is consistent. It doesn't care whether you like Santa Claus or fawns.
Right.
It forces you, so there's got to be a working economy in there, or not. If there's a civil war, there's a backstory, there's politics. If you drop a bunch of kids into the middle of a civil war, what's going to happen to them? They'll be chewed up. So I felt as though I had to reimpose kind of reality on this fantastical, anything can happen, Never Land of Narnia. And that's what I wound up doing. But I was too lazy to do it the Tolkien way. So
you did somewhat in between.
So I did it sort of somewhat in between. I write so slowly and painfully that the idea of writing a document that other people won't read, it's just like it makes me want to cry. So I did end up having to write, some kind of backstory stuff.
Do you have a map?
Fillory. Do I have a map?
Yeah.
Well, I had, there's a map in the flyleaf of the book. I tried to draw the map initially, and I was like, it'll be great. It'll be like, I'll draw this map, and I'll draw it like, like a 10-year-old would draw a fantasy map. And I drew the map, and it looked like a 2-year-old. It was so bad. I couldn't get to that 10-year-old level. So I then ended up hiring my wife's ex-boyfriend to draw the map.
It's always a good.
I know, right? I was just.
You at least are good for something.
Yeah, well, exactly. You've got to get something out of them.
Yeah.
So, but it's not very accurate.
Oh.
It's not. If you ever find yourself in Fillory, just don't even use that map. That's because it's just you're going to end up.
Oh man, I hope I find myself in Fillory someday.
You're going to be led all over the place by that map. It doesn't quite work out. So I feel like I could make a map, but it's sort of in my head. I can't.
Right. Well, you wrote about it. I guess that's how it transcribes.
Yeah. I'm not. Yeah, that sort of.
Yeah. Illustrator.
Yeah, not a visual person. Well, tell me about the process on on Panic. Tell me about your process, because your process is obviously a highly effective process because you produce a great number of words.
Yeah.
Which is, it's like a weird thing to say, but authors are, I find, are kind of obsessive about this. Like,
What, about the process?
about the process and about word counts. Like everyone's
Right,
wondering-
yes. Everyone's obsessed about word counts. It's true.
If you are an author and you start tweeting about how many words you wrote that day, unfollowed. No, blocked.
Oh my gosh,
you're
you
dead
would
to me.
hate our writers' retreats. We do writers' retreats, and that's all you hear.
Blocked.
Like, just cries
Blocked.
from around the house, like 2,500. I'm like, I'm at 30. I don't really feel like I write necessarily a ton every day. I just write incredibly rigorously, with robotic consistency.
Yeah.
I have also a whole metrics about how much I write if I'm working on one book, 2 book, or 3 books simultaneously. So I write like anywhere between 1,000 and 1,750 words a day. But I really rarely take a day off. It actually makes me very anxious to take a day off.
I've wondered about this because I know about your sort of robotic consistency, and yet sometimes when I'm waking up on Sunday and I'm hungover, I think, is Lauren going to write today, or does Sundays count?
Well, I mean, Lev, not all of us get
hit her-
hungover, so some of us wake up fresh as a daisy every day. I mean, I really do. I mean, like today I didn't write actually, but it's because I was editing 2 pieces because I want to send them off. But that's very rare. I mean, I think it really is habitual. It's not even a discipline, although I have talked about it as a discipline, but it's like at some point I had a discipline to do it, but now at this point, it's just like any other habit you would develop that's ingrained, and I get kind of panicky and anxious and a little bit unpleasant if I don't do it. So I think just over time, that just leads to, a big volume of stuff. Much of it is not, I think I probably have actually in some ways a less efficient process than you do, though, because most of what I write in first drafts is really awful and then gets thrown out. Do you write that way, or do you edit as you go?
Let's see. Generally speaking, I don't write it throughout a lot. I revise a lot. I probably revise between 12 and 20 times per book. So I write a draft, and I basically keep it, but it's really crap. It's really crap.
Revise, so you don't revise as you go. You write the whole draft first, or
I try to be. Yeah, I try to keep that. It's like I picture myself on a jet ski because I think that would be fun. I've never been on a jet ski. I have a great fear of them, actually. That would be a good panic thing.
Yeah.
But I imagine, if I slow down, I'm going to sink below the surface.
Yes, I feel that way.
When I'm writing a first draft, I try to just keep with consistency. I've heard of writers who would type manually and then lock the pages in a safe to prohibit them from revising them, which doesn't actually make any sense because you don't know the combination of your own stuff. Somebody else.
Well, maybe they're really lazy.
Maybe. So I try to just do the full draft and then only then start revising. I did the book that's coming out in summer. I did throw out 30,000 words, which is one of the hardest things that I've ever done.
That must have been after it was. I mean, at what stage? Like after the first draft?
Yeah, this was stuff that had been revised 7 times, and it wasn't.
Yeah, it wasn't working.
It wasn't working.
Yeah, I mean, I do the same thing. My first drafts are really, really messy, partly because I feel like I would be paralyzed, again, if I stopped. And I do feel the same way. Like, there's a certain kind of momentum to it, and I just have to keep chugging along, and if I don't, I'll get totally stymied. But I do throw out a lot. I mean, I would say that's why I kind of don't understand when people ask me about writer's block. I mean, I think what people mean is like, don't you ever have days where you don't have anything good to write? And I'm like, oh yeah, 90% of the time, I mean, like, I really feel like half of what I write at least is not very good at all, but that's you can always change it and revise it later. But yeah, no, I do have a kind of bizarre consistency to my writing, to the point where this is now a story that many people know, but and I'm sure as you know, but I wrote part of my first novel, or most of my first novel, on my BlackBerry because I was commuting between jobs and graduate school and everything else. And I still will write on my phone. That's why I'm like the only person in the world who still has a BlackBerry, is I can type on it. I can actually type on it just as quickly as I can on a computer. But like if I haven't done my writing by a certain time in the day, and I have a dinner or something, I'll go to dinner and then just constantly excuse myself to go to the bathroom to do writing in the bathroom. And people think I have like a digestive disorder or a drug problem. But I got my writing done, so Yeah.
Wait, so do you type it into an email and then send the email to yourself?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, it's bizarre. I'm strange.
That's
but I don't feel like you. Why do you say you're a slow writer? We've talked about this because you also work for Time, so you're obviously juggling a lot of things, and you are also. I mean, your books are not short, and they're also infinitely complex. So I feel like you must be writing. Don't you write every day, or no?
Well, no, I'm more of a binger.
Yeah.
I think.
What's the most you've ever written on a binge?
Oh well, I mentioned that time that I had that character that just completely ran away with me. She was 6,000-7,000 words a day. That was. Mm-hmm. Now you tell me that you've written more than that.
No way. Not even close.
Yeah?
No, I can't binge. I mean, on writing. Yeah. I can't at all binge on writing. I literally, I mean, at a certain point, my brain kind of, there's like a fizzle, a pop. It's kind of like Rice Krispie treats. There's like a fizzle, a pop, and my brain goes dark, and then I have to take a nap. That's why I nap so much. I nap like 3 times a day.
It's important. Did you nap today?
Of course, yeah. No, I'm probably going to nap right after I get off stage before the signing for like 3 minutes. I'm just like I don't know, is there an animal that does that? I'm like really laser focused and then falls asleep, pops up, laser focused, and then goes down again. Like a marmot? Do marmots do that?
I don't know a lot about marmots.
Google.
Cats are like that. But what about the writing space? Take us into the writing studio of Lauren Oliver. Do you have a space? Do you have like a machine with sort of special stickers on it or something?
With motivational phrases? No.
What time do you start?
Well, I mean, I do. It's my preference to get my writing done in the morning before people start emailing me. So I try to get up around 7:30 and do as much writing as I can before 9. Well, before the publishing world starts emailing me, which is about 10:30, 11. It's kind of a lackadaisical industry. But I also have a company. A literary development company, so that's actually quite a large portion of my work.
Right, I want to talk about that. What the hell is a literary development company?
We don't know. Lexa, what's a literary development company? I mean, basically it's kind of like, there's a lot of different ways of describing it, but it's kind of like an incubator, a literary incubator. So what we do is we come up with ideas and for novels. And we do actually quite a bunch of different things now. We're growing and changing and adapting our approach. But the heart of it is that we come up with ideas for books and we find authors that we think or writers that we think are really promising. They have great voices. They may not know how to kind of structure a story, or they may be writers at this point. They may be authors who have published, but they're looking to deepen their craft or change their career or go in a different way. And we kind of help them do that. And we teach them how to do that in the context of writing one of our ideas and working with us on one of our ideas. And then when that's complete, when we have a book, we'll sell it to publishers and we'll get them launched into the world as authors, or renew or change their career or whatever it is, whoever, depending on who we're working with. So I actually do have quite a bit of work during the day that editing and just managerial stuff. Thank God my business partner does most of that. So. I try to do my writing done in the morning. The truth is I travel about 40% of the year, so I'm often doing my writing like in the back of a cab going to JFK or sandwiched in a train or whatever. So I try not to be too precious about my workspace. What about you? Do you have a special pen?
A pen? I haven't touched a pen in like 40 years.
Okay, fine. A special computer, special program, Pages.
Oh, I switched to Scrivener actually. Have we talked about this?
No.
It's really boring. But basically, there's this program called Scrivener, which
I know
is sort
about
of
the program, yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of Microsoft Word is sort of built for writing business letters, but not really for novels. And whereas Scrivener is kind of engineered for these long documents. And it's
Has it changed your life? Would you describe that it has changed your life?
It's life changing.
Wow.
Yeah, I would.
Okay. I'll have to try it.
Yeah, and it's really good. But otherwise, I'm not precious at all about my workspace. Again, there's lots of children around. They will invade your workspace like termites.
Yeah.
Chew on it.
Yeah.
I used to be obsessive about this one chair in a coffee shop in Park Slope.
Really? Which coffee shop?
It's I think
defunct?
It's shut now. It was on Fifth Avenue. It was this huge sprawling place that had these sofas and stuff like that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, was it the Tea Lounge?
No, it wasn't the Tea
Okay.
Lounge. Although I did write there a lot too. But there was this one chair, and I would come there, and I began to realize there was another writer who also needed
Oh my
that
God, that
chair.
is so funny.
I would go, and he would be there, and I'd be like,
And he became your nemesis?
get the hell out of that chair. Get out of the chair. I need the chair. And he wouldn't. He would just sit there all day.
Yeah.
And then, years later, I was assigned by Time to do an interview.
Was it him?
And the interview was with Jonathan Safran Foer, and it was him.
No!
It
I
was
was hoping
him.
at least he'd be a failed novelist.
No, I know, right? Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close was written in my
God,
chair.
that's
It
so
is therefore,
funny.
by rights, my novel.
Absolutely.
And
I
it
think
should
it
have
should be
my
getting
name
royalties.
on it.
Yeah.
It's disappointing in so many ways that
So disappointing.
won't hold up in court.
Oh, God damn it, for always, every time. Yeah.
So I'd forgotten before you mentioned it that you went to an MFA program.
I did, yeah.
Was that because I associate MFA programs with kind of lapidary novels in which nothing happens.
Funny you should say that, because that's exactly what I wrote when I was there. Yes.
Really?
Well, I think that, yeah, I mean, I'd written many novels in which nothing happened. Actually, I have kind of a claim to fame that you may not know about me. I wrote in graduate school an 800-page novel. I wrote it twice. So I wrote 1,600 pages in which not a single interesting thing happens, which is mathematically improbable.
Yeah.
So that was, I mean, I do feel like I learned a lot in graduate school, and I think part of what I learned, and I learned a lot of like geeky craft stuff, which is kind of boring, although not boring for me. But I think the most important thing I learned in graduate school was when to accept criticism and when to kind of reject it or ignore it, because it's really good preparation for being on Twitter and Goodreads later on.
Oh my God.
It's critical.
But how do you know when to accept it and when to reject it?
Well, you basically figure out who you personally like, and then you ignore everybody else. No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's a complicated thing, but I think that it relates to basically like some people kind of innately understand the kind of story you're trying to tell, which is why it's important to get a good editor. I mean, sometimes people, there's just a way in which people can be intellectually or creatively sympathetic to one another or, empathetic to one another. And then there are ways in which people just fundamentally don't understand. And they can be two smart people, but they just don't understand the kind of novel you're trying to bring out. So, and that's true of an MFA program too. And it really was the first, I'd never taken a creative writing class ever. So I had never workshopped my stuff in front of other people.
Yeah.
And so it really was, I do think that partly what you need to be a novelist is, you need kind of a singular, almost insane drive to it, like compulsion to it, which I think is deeper even than love. But you also just need to develop, especially at this point in time, you need to develop like a really thick skin and tolerance for criticism and for, now when you make decisions that anger people, such as the ending of my entire trilogy, you get feedback on it right away and constantly, and very, like sometimes death threats too. Like that's the kind of feedback you get. I mean, it's over Twitter and there's like lots of hearts, but still.
Right. People are very disinhibited.
Yeah.
Which is totally new. Even 10 years ago, it wasn't writing fiction wasn't like this. No one has ever written fiction under these conditions before, where you have this constant barrage of feedback.
Constant, yeah.
It's I find it hard to manage.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. How do you manage it?
I am super thin-skinned. Like I am just a dick about being criticized. I really, it's taken me a long time to sort of get off this hair trigger thing where I took it really badly. It's a really unappealing quality, but it was something that it took a lot of time to work through. And even then, I can those sometimes those negative tweets. I don't know what personality type goes on Twitter and then and sort of ats an author and tells them how terrible they think their book is.
It's so bizarre.
But the good tweets I never remember, but I can recite the bad tweets. Your writing is so bad it hurts my soul. That was one.
Oh, my favorite Goodreads, I can recite my favorite Goodreads, which was literally not a criticism of my books, but an entire, she was impugning my entire personality and existence as a human being. It was amazing.
Wow.
I mean, she was like, what makes Lauren Oliver think that she can write different novels, stick to what you already know how to do? By the way, that was after I'd published one novel when I was 26. I was like, I hope this woman is never a mother. Can you imagine? Like her son's trying to ride a tricycle or a bicycle. She's like, what makes you think you can ride a bicycle? But yeah, no, it does. It stays with you. It stays with you. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's actually harder when you write a series. I don't know if you found this too, because I mean, the good thing about writing a standalone, like with Panic, there's relief to it because by the time people start to see it, it's done. I mean, like you've done, the chapter is closed, like there's no adjustments to be made, but it's very hard to kind of have integrity when you're writing a series, when you're getting constant responses to, and had you planned the whole series out when you started writing or no?
No, Magicians was going to be a standalone.
And then, so you've had this experience then where people are responding to certain elements, and you don't know, even if they're not, like they might love something that you know is not going to make it into book 2, or is going to change, or a romantic relationship, or, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's difficult. My therapist is always, I'm always complaining to my therapist about how hard this is. Now I'm complaining to you. And he's like, no, it's so great. You know, you have access to all this basically, you know, fantastic marketing data, you know, this endless fund of input from other people. My therapist does not understand the creative process.
Yeah, not a novelist. See, I think you should punch
Yeah.
him in the face, but maybe not, because, that might lead to bad results.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is really hard. I mean, again, I've written, after the Delirium trilogy, I've written several standalones. I mean, I'm writing a middle grade series now as well with my father. But I have a completely different response to it. I'm writing all of the books before the first one comes out because I just can't.
Wow.
Yeah, I just can't be, you know, I just really can't tolerate that level of marketing feedback, as your therapist creatively puts it.
Yes,
Yeah.
very uncreatively puts it.
Yeah.
I'm having negative transference on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if we have questions floating around. Do you think it's time? Did I prematurely ask for questions?
Yeah, did they circulate the slips, the little slips of paper where you can write the questions on?
Okay, ask me another one. Do something else.
Well, one thing I wanted to bring up was something odd that we have in common is between the two of us, we have 4 parents who are literature professors.
That is true.
Both of my parents are English professors, and your parents are also.
Yep, both of them are, and they are both here. Yep.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Should
I embarrass them? No, I'm just kidding. By making them stand up? Yes, they are.
Has that been a positive thing for you as a writer? I mean, having
no, it's been terrible. Mom and Dad, why'd you
you.
do this to me? Yeah, no, I mean, it's been tremendously positive. You know, my parents are both very brilliant. My father is a writer. My mother is a writer as well and edits a literary journal. I mean, you know, I grew up in a house that was pretty much filled with books and a very, you know, intellectually stimulating house, and I think that's been incredibly influential. Creativity was, I mean, it wasn't kind of, I mean, it was so deeply fostered and encouraged in our household. It wasn't like, oh, childish pursuits, you're going to paint and dance and write. It was like, those were important things that you could do or chose to do. Yeah, no, it's been a huge influence on me, definitely. And I almost feel badly because I feel like it gives me a really unnatural, I feel like it's like writing is like a sinecure for me. Like I just stepped into it.
Right. You sort of inherit, it's like an inherited,
yeah.
It's a House of Lords kind of thing.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. What about you? Do you feel like that's been influential in your career?
Yeah, but in a really sort of difficult way. Did you experience this at all? I mean, I felt as though, I grew up in this house where both of my parents were English professors. They were both writers. There were a lot of, and our house was again full of books. There were a lot of voices in that house. There were a lot of very loud voices.
Yeah.
Very authoritative voices, very accomplished voices. And as a kid, and then later as an adult, and later as a middle-aged man, I still felt as though it was hard for me to find my voice amid all those voices. Like, how can I differentiate myself and find my own voice when there's all these voices, all around me. My sister became a mathematician and then a sculptor because she said she was knocking off one by one careers that involved no words.
Yeah, that's so
Numbers,
interesting.
hunks of stone.
Right,
but
right.
not words.
Yeah.
No, she'd had enough words.
Yeah, no, I definitely felt that way about my house, but I just, you know, in the alchemical way that it happens when personalities develop, I just had a very different response to it. I just learned how to raise my voice. I can speak really loudly. And I think that has also really helped me. I mean, it helped me in the formation of my company, and it just has helped me to be really unafraid to advocate for myself and my career and and to try things on my own. I mean, I think that was, I feel like in my family, you had to develop from a young age. If you wanted to participate in the conversation, you had to have something to say, and you had to be prepared to state it. And I think that was actually something, I mean, I noticed that in college when I went to University of Chicago, and I'd be in these big lecture halls, and you know, the only people still, I mean, this was like, 2001, but the only people raising their hands to speak in these lecture halls would be, the students would be guys, you know, and then there'd be me, who literally used to have a moratorium on how much I was allowed to speak in class, because I was basically taking over. But I think that while obnoxious during my collegiate years, you know, that has proved really useful to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who are the writers that you study that have been a big influence on you?
Well, I mean, yeah, the writers that have influenced me are my favorite writers. I mean, I feel like it's pretentious to say that they've influenced me, because that suggests that I think that, you know, like I'm emulating them in some way, but I love magical realism. I love the kind of work that you do, which is I love fantasy that doesn't feel like high fantasy, and that kind of floats back and forth between the real world and fantasy. I mean, it's the Narnia thing. I always loved books where like you felt like the difference between reality and fantasy was kind of tissue thin, and you could push through the back of a wardrobe or a platform 9 3/4 and suddenly find yourself in a magical other world. So, but I feel like magical realism accomplishes that in some other way. So I love Gabriel Garcia Marquez is one of my favorites. I really love Ian McEwan. Agatha Christie has been hugely influential on me.
Sure.
Yeah, I love her. I've read all of her books, like 87, because it's perfect, because by the time I finish reading all of like 87 of them, they're all the same, so I've forgotten what happens in the first one. I can just continue reading them on a loop. And then I really, like in children's books, I love Roald Dahl, I love Neil Gaiman, both his children and his adult stuff. So those are some of them. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, Once and Future King was a big book for me, very big book. The way he sort of brought the King Arthur story into a modern kind of novelistic, realist, psychologically nuanced. Thank you. Mode. I mean, that's sort of everything I want to do in fiction. I truly love that book. And then, you know, I've noticed that if you write fantasy, you're very, very free to steal from literary authors. If you take a little bit of Proust and drag it over the border, kicking and screaming, into the fantasy genre, nobody knows where it came from.
What, like a talking Madeleine? Like, what would that look like in Proust?
There's a scene in Remembrance of Things Past where, you know, you've had like 100 pages, 200 pages, like 1,000 pages of what a great, you know, this sensitive boy's childhood and how sad he was when his mommy didn't come up and kiss him goodnight. And then he stumbles on this scene, which is like a sadomasochistic sex scene between two women. He just sees it, he sort of overhears it, and it's just like the world just tears open and becomes so much more huge and complex than it had been before. It's an incredible moment. You know, so I sort of borrowed that for a scene in one of my books. Yves Lenoir was a big influence.
Oh, nice, yeah.
I feel like we should go to the cards.
Yeah.
Shall we?
Yeah.
All right.
Now I feel like I'm on a game show, and because it's the way you're holding them, shielding them from view. So I don't cheat.
You write scenes of such emotional intensity. How do you get into that headspace for brief periods in the back of taxis or restaurant bathrooms?
Well, I'm an emotionally, I would say, intense person. Writing is for me, I mean, now this is going to be my nerd moment for a minute, but writing comes out, for me, it comes out of a great lifelong love of reading, and it's served many purposes over the years for me in both writing and reading, and it continues to kind of evolve. But I am so practiced at this point in going into another world. Like I can just slip into it, both with books and when I'm writing and when I'm reading, and it's like a relief almost. So I have actually kind of normally a tension almost going on when I'm in the regular world where I'm living half in a different world, either something I'm reading or something I'm writing or sometimes both, or there's competitive worlds going on. I love the quote about writing that it's a socially acceptable form of schizophrenia. And I mean, you know, it's like just like turning around. Like it's relatively easy for me to fall into it. And I'm not sure that I always have that skill. I'm sure that I didn't. But that's just what comes from writing every day since I was like 9 years old. I mean, that's like, not to give away my age. That's like 5 years of practice. But you know, that's like 21 years of practice. That's a lot of time. So it's just like, you know, I do feel like it's become kind of seamless for me. What?
All right, next question. Was there any inspiration behind the making of Alex, Lena, or Julian?
Alex is a real person. Just kidding. Whoever wrote that question is so upset right now. Is there any inspiration? I mean, I definitely, and I'm curious about this with you, Lev, but I definitely draw inspiration from kind of generalized inspiration from people I know. So when I was writing about Alex, and Lena falling in love with Alex, I definitely drew from my memories of what it was like to fall in love at 16 for the first time. But my characters never really feel like, they're never lifted out of real life and just like flattened onto a page, except in one single instance where in Before I Fall, Sam, the main character, has like a horrible, awful boyfriend named Rob, and he is modeled exactly after a horrible, awful person named Rob in my high school, whose name was also Rob. But other than that, I mean, it becomes an amalgamation of things, and I do think partly your characters, even if they're male or they're minor characters or they're the bad guys, I do think that novels are kind of like dreams in that everybody is kind of you, a projection of you, even if they look different or wear a different face. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, other people squirm in there, though.
Yeah. But like really, like in their whole form, or just like bits from people?
There's one person who squirmed into the Magician's books, just undiluted. But I didn't realize it until years later. I didn't realize. I spent years patting myself on the back and saying, "What an original character I've created out of my brilliant brain." And then I suddenly was, wait, no, I didn't make that up. That's, this person there. It was Penny.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
Yeah, Penny's real. It's a real person.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
We just got a fresh influx of cards.
Oh, nice.
Lauren, what's the character for you that's waiting to be written? That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. I'm not, I mean, I don't know that I can say that though in isolation, because I mean, characters definitely, when I write a book and it ends up working, it's because a character and a story or a story idea has come to me simultaneously. So it's like a character narrating a particular set of circumstances. So I can't say that there is a character in isolation that I know that I haven't written. I know I really would love my whole life, all I've wanted to do is write a middle grade fantasy series. But I have not found a way to do it. And I have not found a way to do it in an original way. So, I mean, I've actually tried it several times, and there have been permutations of two characters that I haven't really managed to write. So I would say, in vague general terms, it's a character that will be the hero and the heroine of a middle grade fantasy series, but I just can't figure it out yet.
You will.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe you should write it and I'll put my name on it. Maybe Jonathan Safran Foer should write it and I'll put my name on it.
He should pay for his many crimes.
Exactly.
Wait, we already did that one. There's a question for me.
Should I ask it?
Yeah, you can.
For Lev, can you actually do magic tricks? And if so, can you do one for us now?
This will reveal to you how incredibly vain and disconnected from reality I am. When I was starting to write The Magicians, this was I didn't have a contract with the magician, so this was on spec, and it ended up taking me 5 years, which was hard to keep going when you spent 5 years on something, and you sometimes you look at this file on your hard drive and think no one's ever going to see this.
Yeah.
But one of my, I used to fantasize about what it would be like to be interviewed about the magicians. Like this was one of these things that I would just allow myself to do. It's a way to kind of keep myself going. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I learned some magic tricks, and then, when I'm getting my profile written about in the New York Times Magazine, they can lead with this thing about how, as we talked, Grossman was magically disappearing things with his hands. So I bought a stack, which I still have, of how-to magic books. Let me tell you something. Doing magic is so hard. It is so hard. I sat there and I couldn't learn to do these things.
So not even anything? You can't materialize a coin from my ear? Oh, so disappointing.
No, I thought that I would be a natural at it. I thought I was like, this is just going to come to me. It did not come. It did not come.
So how did you come up with, though, then the kind of just the way that magic functions in the world of the magicians? Which, I mean, you say it's Harry Potter fan fiction, but it obviously feels incredibly different and is incredibly different, especially the way that the magic works. For example, no wands.
No wands, right?
Although staffs at various occasions.
Yeah, I did. I went there. Yeah. Staffs. They're just so cool.
Yeah,
cool
definitely.
looking. I wanted to see the fan art of the staff. Well, again, sometimes when you're writing your way into a crowded genre, a genre like fantasy, which has so many master practitioners who have worked in it, who are still working in it, you start to think about, where's my way in? Where's my place in this very complicated universe? And one thing I thought about was, I've never felt like anybody did magic in a way that made it seem tough enough. The magic in Harry Potter. It doesn't seem that hard, right? I mean, you swish, you flick, and Wingardium Leviosa. It's not that hard. It's something you can teach to school kids. I felt as though if magic were that easy, everybody'd be doing it. So I thought it should be you ought to have to pay. You ought to have to suffer to have that kind of power. It ought to come at a serious price. And I thought about one of the most painful, challenging educational experiences of my life, which was learning to play the cello.
I was going to say guitar, but yeah.
Yeah, I studied cello for 15 years, and after 15 years of backbreaking work, I became okay at the cello. But the challenge of it, the physical discomfort, the physical and mental discipline of it, it was really hard. They study from this book of magical exercises at Brankville's called the Poppers. And if anybody here plays the cello, you're familiar with Popper etudes, which is this thing that everybody at the Popper High School of Cello Playing, everybody has to go through it. You can't go through it, though, because it's too hard. It's just backbreaking.
That's all the finger positions.
Yeah.
How are you determining which questions have?
No, I'm sorry. I've been shuffling them back through. There aren't that many. You guys got to come with the slips. We need more slips because we've gone through almost all of them. What's happening with movies for both of your books? Panic's been optioned, right?
Yes, Panic has been optioned by Universal, and they're working on the script now, so that's exciting. I mean, the thing about Hollywood is that I've discovered that it is kind of like getting a movie actually made is like making the world's largest souffle, and all of these ingredients need to come together at exactly the right time or the whole thing just collapses. So I mean, with Delirium, we got very close on a TV series. They actually filmed a pilot, which then randomly parts of it leaked online, which was amazing.
Is that true? Is that on YouTube?
Oh yeah, totally. You can find it online. I'm like not allowed to post it. I mean, I could, but no, it's all over, and it's cute. So.
How involved were you with that?
I saw the script several times. I never went to the actual shooting of it. I mean, that was kind of, had it been picked up for air, I definitely would have. But I really loved the producers with whom I was working, so I was, in touch with them through the process. But yeah, so we got all the way to the pilot stage, and then it didn't go to air, which was so sad. So now we're trying to wrest the rights back so we can go back to making a movie. And, before I fall, we go through like growth spurts and then retractions. So we're in a growth spurt recently. Now we seem to be in a kind of contraction, but I just keep, you just have to have patience and wait. I read somewhere that the average length of time it takes for a book to go to a movie is 7 years. That's average. That's insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
That makes me feel better because it's a long process.
Yeah.
I was and am still so attached to the fantasy of just getting the call and just saying, you know, Steven Spielberg has bought your book for
and it's coming out
for
tomorrow.
$1 million and it's coming out tomorrow.
Exactly.
And George Clooney plays Quentin. Makes no sense, but
No,
you know,
absolutely.
what about that
but
call?
I will see that
would be
movie. I will see
right?
that movie.
Me too.
Yes.
I would see the hell out of that movie.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
That's still the fantasy, is getting that call. But it is much more like, I always think of it as a scavenger hunt, where you're running around and you're just like, okay, I've got a showrunner and a producer and a screenwriter, and we've got a studio and a network. Oh, I dropped the showrunner somewhere. I got to go back and get it.
I know.
You know,
It's so chaotic. It's so funny. I mean, I was talking about this with a film exec because I go to LA pretty frequently, both for my stuff and also for our business. And I was talking to a producer there. Maybe it was a studio exec. Anyway, we were talking. They were talking about all the movies that they were excited that they were, in pre-production or pre-production. And finally, I was like, wow, that seems like a lot of stuff that you have going on. And she's like, oh, yeah, well, none of it will get made. And I was like, wait, what? And she's like, oh, yeah, no, it's impossible to get a movie made. And I was like, but that's your whole job. That would be so depressing. I mean, at least with books, you can just write them and then, push them, kick them out into the world.
Right.
You can't guarantee anybody will read them, but you can at least get them out the door.
They get made.
Yeah, they get made, definitely.
Yeah, I went through I actually went through the Fox process a year before you did with Delirium, and we had a great pilot written, but we didn't even make the pilot.
Yeah. Was for The Magicians you were going to do?
For The
TV?
Magicians, yeah.
What are you guys going to do now?
With The Magicians?
With rights, yeah.
I can't. It's that expanding and contracting thing. Which is the good part? Expanding and contracting.
I mean, according to my friend Lisa, who's probably in the audience, they're both necessary. But yeah.
Well, we're in the sort of what's the opposite of entropy? It's like we're coming together.
Okay.
We've come together far enough. I can't talk about it because it's not supposed to be
that's exciting.
but it's exciting.
But
then it's gonna just go back to.
Well, hopefully not. Hopefully not.
Yeah, maybe it will. But an incredible number of it's like the Dark Crystal. An incredible number of things have to
align.
Yeah. The Dark Crystal explains so much about our modern era.
Well, I feel like if I just keep writing about 2 books a year, eventually, just because of the law of averages, one of them will make it.
Just saturate it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Just saturate the entire market. I know if I start writing picture books now, I'll have the market from cradle to grave. So that's my next move.
Incredibly, you're like vertical. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about your adult book, which I have read, even though it's not coming out for a few months? It's incredibly good, and you do things that I've never seen you do before on the page. What was that? Because that's your first, apart from the 800-page one where nothing happens. That one, that's your sort of first.
Yeah, well, it's my first functional adult novel. I mean, the 800-page novel is not actually the first novel I ever wrote. It was probably better than the first adult novel I wrote, which is sad.
What was the first adult novel you read?
Well, I mean, I can't really describe it because that also had no plot.
What was it called? Did it have a title?
No, and it was about a 37-year-old man who takes up with a prostitute after his first wife is dying of cancer. Because I was 21 and really writing from my own experience.
Sure,
as one should do.
Know.
So that did not work out very well for me, and for anybody in the reading public who's ever read it. But Rooms is my adult novel coming out in the fall. It's different, it's weird. I mean, the other thing though is that, again, I mean, I don't have such a conscious understanding of how what makes adult or teen different. I mean, I know that they are, and in this case, Rooms is very different from, let's say, Panic or Delirium, but I'm not sure really, I still don't really quite, people ask me this all the time, you probably get this all the time, what differentiates adult books from teen books? And there's so much crossover in readership now, and I think Panic is probably, for example, like Panic I think is probably the most, I think it will appeal equally. But I really still don't know how to describe that difference. I mean, I know how to describe the difference between like really literary adult fiction and teen stuff, because really literary adult fiction I often feel like doesn't need to have any redemption in it necessarily. It can be kind of bleak. consistently, relentlessly. Anybody who's read Jude the Obscure should agree with me, I think. But I don't know really how to describe the difference between commercial or relatively commercial literary adult versus teen. Do you feel like you have a strong handle on this? Because I feel like you write adult books, but they are really appealing to teens.
Yes, I have a really weak handle on this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the job of the world to figure out what it was I just wrote. You know, I write it, and then honestly, Magicians could have been sold as YA.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. But that's like a quirk of the market almost.
But do you feel that way? I mean, I don't know, because I mean, well, anyway, Rooms is content-wise. I do hope that my teen fans will still read it. But you know, content-wise, pacing-wise, I think it's different. And obviously, you know, some of the characters are dealing with thematic issues like marriage and childbirth. Also things I don't know anything about, but they're dealing with things that are obviously less resonant to teens, although there is a teenage character in it whom I love to write, Trenton, who's kind of a sad sack. But yeah, no, it was really fun. I mean, I hope to be able to write everything in the future. That's really my dream and goal.
Is it?
Yeah.
Picture books?
Yes.
Would you
You have to illustrate them, though. Your map-making skills.
Yeah, right. We'll go for the two-year-old market.
Yeah. Just conscript your children to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My many children.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. What else are they good for?
Well, being termites in your workspace, apparently.
Yeah, that also.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would like to be able to do all three. Yeah. We'll see. I mean, we'll see how it ends up.
It's a ghost story.
It's a ghost story. So yeah, Rooms is.
You've come back to ghosts.
I have come back to ghosts. I love to put dead people in my books.
Yes.
I don't know why. I guess it's because my father researches serial killers. Maybe I have a morbid personality as a result. I do wear black a lot. So,
You do.
Yeah. Yeah, Rooms is about a family. Well, on one level, it's about a family that comes back to clean out a big house after the death of the patriarch, a big old house. But it's also narrated in part from the perspective of ghosts that haven't taken over the body of the house, basically. And so instead of by chapters, it's organized by rooms. And for everyone who's going to get Panic today and get it signed, I have little Rooms postcards. So you never have to go 6 months without a new Lauren Oliver release. Yeah.
Actually, I've gotten the sign, so I think we're going to have to wrap things up.
Okay.
Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you, Lev. Thank you guys for
Thank
coming.
you.
Yeah.
Lauren Oliver.
Lev
everybody.
Grossman.